What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So although the announcement of plants was kind of met with honestly slightly mixed reviews, and a lot of people are honestly kind of hesitant to believe that they might be a good thing for the game, I'm honestly a little bit skeptical myself. There is a lot of additional information that's been released since the initial announcement that clarifies a lot of the things and mechanics in general, and especially makes plants a lot easier to comprehend. So let's jump right into talking about some things that you might not have known about plants. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button and let's begin. So first up is something that's probably going to make a lot of people happy, and it's something that I really want to stress about plants, something that I wish everybody knew about them, and that's the fact that plants are not a guaranteed thing. Riot Meddler has actually gone on record multiple times on the League of Legends forums and said that if the community really just doesn't want plants, they will absolutely 100% get pulled from the game completely. He addressed a lot of the concerns people have with plants to help people understand what Riot's vision for them is, but the focus is definitely on making them improve gameplay. They really want them to add to the game. And if they happen to not achieve that in the eyes of the people playing the game and in the community, then Riot's definitely going to take them out of the game, and that's gonna be that. Next up kind of leads into the idea that plants might not actually be so bad for the game because really they're not going to be nearly as random as people might have originally thought. There are set locations all over the map where plants of each type can actually spawn, and it can essentially be summarized by honey fruits in the river, blast cones in the jungle, and scryers bloom a little bit back from the river next to objectives like dragon or baron. So with that in mind, it's not like you're often going to randomly stumble across a healing plant at a perfect time. It's more likely you're going to have an idea of where they're at so that you can play around with them a little bit like you would just with any other neutral objective. For the next thing that we're taking a look at, it's something that I was originally actually completely wrong about, because unlike what I originally thought about the update for plants, it turns out that plants will first spawn between 1 minute and 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the game randomly, and the first wave of plants will pretty much be almost entirely preset and thus very predictable as far as when and how the spawns go. One of the main concerns with plants was that the randomness might potentially screw over one jungler a lot more than the other and potentially put in a really unnecessary RNG element into the game, because early advantages can have such a big impact on the game in general, but there's actually only about 10 seconds of variation in when plants spawn, so it's going to be really minimal and probably not enough to give an advantage to either side on the map. The spawns themselves are going to develop throughout the game, so plants will start to appear in different places as the game progresses. So in the early game, until around 15 minutes or so, plants only appear in the deeper parts of the jungle, where they're not going to have a super strong impact on each lane. But as the game moves on from them, spawn points that are closer to the side or the mid lanes are going to start getting used, but those won't happen until around 25 minutes into a game. For example, there are some blast cone spawn locations that aren't actually activated until that mid game point 25 minutes in, but once they are online, you'd be able to use them to try to dive towers and potentially have a bigger influence over lanes and just fights in lanes in general. So a huge part of the game, especially in the higher elos, is generally just information about what's happening in the game, even when you haven't necessarily seen everything directly. For example, seeing a scuttle crab taken essentially means that the enemy jungler is probably on that side of the map because you see it die, and as a result you know that someone's there, of course, because they had to kill it right. And this as well is going to be a mechanic that exists on plants. So once plants die, they won't just disappear and deny all information, they're actually going to leave a corpse for about 30 seconds after their death, which means that when you decide to invade the enemy jungle, it's probably a good idea to avoid the plants actually, because they'll reveal your location to anyone that looks at the map and sees that dead plant there. And sometimes you'll just have to make a careful decision about whether taking the plant will give you enough of an advantage to be worth giving away the information about what area on the map you've been sneaking around. Now, in terms of the actual plant spawn mechanics though, things are potentially a lot more complex under the surface. Riot has said that each type of plant has a few specified locations per quarter of the jungle that it can spawn in, and it's limited based on how many plants can be in that area at any given moment. So they gave us a couple of examples. For example, blast cones have 5 different spawn areas in each quarter of the jungle, one of which is extremely common and the other 4 are a little bit less frequent. But they're also also can never be more than 2 blast cones in 1/4 of the map, and they also spawn around every 3 minutes or so, but always near walls that you can cross over using them. It's a similar story for Scryer's Broom and Honey Fruit in terms of spawn times and rules, but each has their own set of locations where they'll show up, and for Honey Fruit that's only really along the river walls actually. Now, most of you guys probably know what each plant does by now, but there's actually some information about the exact stat values of how they're going to be implemented, so we figured those would probably be a good idea to mention. Scryer's Bloom, for example, has about 4,000 range, and it will last for 15 seconds on stationary targets like wards or junglers. And the vision will last for about 15 seconds on stationary targets like wards, jungle camps, or enemy champions in order to give you time to move near them and destroy them. And if there's anything moving around that is revealed, it will last for a shorter period, like, pollen falling off of a champion moving through the river or something like that. For Honey Fruit, it's actually going to be a mixture of flat and percent missing health and mana restored. So we don't actually know exactly how much health is coming from where. What we do know is that each fruit scales based on your champion level, and eating one fruit will give you a 90% slow for 0.25 seconds. Now, it's probably going to be around 30% health restored on average for eating all 5 fruits from the honey fruit plant, but the slow actually stacks, so that means you're going to get a 90% slow for 1.25 seconds to eat all the plants, which might actually end up being quite the risk in certain scenarios. Now, something that was rumored early on about plants that ended up not actually being true was that plants would always be visible on the minimap. Now, it turns out that currently plants will only show up on the minimap after you've either seen them either growing or ready to actually be activated in person or with a ward or something like that. Then they'll remain on the minimap until you get vision of that location again, similar to how smaller jungle camps work, or maybe buildings in RTS games, I guess. Essentially, you won't be able to track enemy champions by the plants disappearing from the minimap randomly, but you will be able to get an idea from the corpses. With that in mind though, it's pretty unlikely that players would be able to base strategies around the locations of plants, because you couldn't, for example, know where a blast cone was so that you could try and invade and then just hop to safety if it ended up going badly because you knew exactly where the plant was. Now, the next thing we're taking a look at that is probably my favorite thing on the list today, and it's something that I'm definitely excited for that I think is probably going to be pretty damn interesting, is that if the community actually ends up liking plants, if the community has a very positive reception, and if players are enjoying it and the plants are working out quite well, Riot will actually look at ways to make them even more inclusive to the rest of the game. Essentially what that means is that could mean there's some items, masteries, or potentially even champion abilities that actually interact with plants directly in the future, perhaps making them spawn quicker, get bonus effects from killing them, or all sorts of random stuff like that. There's a lot of design space around them for sure, but Riot definitely do want to make sure that they are a positive, balanced change for the game that players like, and also they definitely do want to give players time just to adjust to the change to having to play around them before they go adding a bunch of things that are going to increase the complexity of the game. Either way, that's just about everything we know so far about plants that hasn't become common knowledge yet. They're definitely a bit better thought out than the first post about plants gave them credit for, so honestly, they might not really be all that bad in reality, but they're definitely arriving in the preseason so that players get a chance to test them out and give feedback so that Riot can decide whether or not they want to keep them around or clear them out, and they're going to be coming into the game on patch 6.22 it looks like. Either way though, looks like that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.